All right, welcome. Today, we're going to pull back the curtain on something that might just reframe how you see the entire history of human thought. We are opening the door to the shadow cabinet.
Think about it. When you hear the word philosophy, a few names probably pop into your head, right? Plato, Aristotle, maybe Kant if you're feeling fancy. But what if that's only half the story? What if the official history of ideas is full of, well, gaps? It's a pretty wild thought, isn't it? The idea that for every famous thinker we celebrate, there's another one whose ideas were just pushed aside, buried, or maybe even intentionally hidden from all of us. And look, this isn't about some big, shadowy conspiracy theory. It's about a much simpler and maybe more important question. What gets left out of the textbooks? And why?
And that question right there brings us to the core idea we're unpacking today, the shadow cabinet. Just imagine for a second an archive, not of the ideas that won the day, but of all the ones that were lost, silenced, or considered way too dangerous to even talk about. This concept is our key to unlocking that hidden history.
So if we could actually open the doors to this archive, what would we even find in there? I mean, what kind of ideas are we really talking about? Let's take a look at how it's all cataloged.
If we're going to organize this secret library, we'd find that most of these ideas fall into four main categories, and each one tells a totally different story about how a thought can just vanish from history. Let's start with the first one.
First up, you've got the dark and obscure. Now, these aren't necessarily scandalous or forbidden, they're just overlooked. Maybe they were completely overshadowed by a more popular thinker at the time, or maybe they were just a little too weird to catch on. They're basically the hidden gems, just waiting to be rediscovered in the dusty corners of history.
Then you have the forgotten or incomplete ideas. And this category is, well, it's kind of tragic, really. This is where we find all the what-ifs of history. We're talking brilliant concepts from thinkers whose work was, say, lost in a library fire, destroyed by invaders, or who just died before they could finish their masterpiece. So much lost potential.
Okay, now things start to get a little more dramatic. The intentionally suppressed. These are the ideas that powerful institutions, whether they were religious, political, or even academic, actively worked to bury. These ideas weren't just forgotten by accident, they were hidden. And that tells you one thing for sure. Someone saw them as a major threat.
And that brings us to our final and definitely most explosive category, the controversial and rejected. Oh yeah, these are the ideas that weren't just hidden, they were openly attacked. They were branded as dangerous, heretical, a total threat to the way things were. This is where you find the true rebels and outcasts of intellectual history.
Okay, so we've got this incredible archive of forbidden philosophies. But how do you actually study them? I mean, it's not enough to just know what the ideas are. You have to understand their whole story. And for that, you need a very specific method. So the method for digging into these ideas has two really crucial parts. First, you've got the exposition. That's basically the what. You have to lay out very clearly what the philosophy is actually about. But that's just step one. The real detective work, the fun part, comes next. Historical investigation. This is where we get to ask why. Why was this idea so threatening? Who was it threatening to?
And honestly, this is the absolute heart of the entire concept. The point isn't just to dig up some weird old idea for the sake of it. The real value is in understanding the society that was so afraid of it. Figuring out why something was labeled dangerous tells you just as much about the mainstream as it does about the fringe. That context is, well, it's everything.
But let's be real. How do you get most people excited about obscure, forgotten philosophies? You need a hook. You need something that taps into that natural human curiosity, our love of secrets. And that is exactly where the uncanny hook comes into play.
The whole strategy is called the uncanny hook. And it's based on a really simple psychological truth. As humans, we are fascinated by what's hidden. So by framing these ideas as forbidden knowledge, you're not just giving people information, you're offering them a key to a secret world. It's irresistible.
And you can see exactly how powerful this is in practice. Just listen to some of these titles. The Gnostic Heresy of Self-Knowledge, The Fatalism of the Pre-Socratics, The Lost Ethics of the Nihilist Cults. They don't sound like a dry history lecture, do they? No way. They sound like adventures, like secrets just waiting for you to unlock them. That's the power of the uncanny hook.
So we've opened the archive, we have our two-part method, we've got our hook, but at the end of the day, what's the real point of all this? Why does digging up these old, forbidden ideas actually matter?
Well, the big takeaway is this. The history of human thought is not a nice, neat, straight line. It's a messy, complicated, tangled web of arguments, power struggles, and paths not taken. By studying the philosophies that got pushed to the side, we get a much richer, more honest, and frankly, a far more complete picture of how we ended up thinking the way we do today.
And that really brings us to the end. The Shadow Cabinet isn't just some cool concept. It's an invitation. It's an invitation for you to look beyond the official story, to question which voices we've all been taught to ignore. So I'll just leave you with this one question. Now that the door's been opened, which forbidden idea will you seek out first?